Can I go on a rant about something, though? I want to rant.
Uh, what? Your news articles are practically rants at this point.
I know.
All right. What do you got? I like your rants. What are you ranting about?
Okay, so do you remember all that hashtag Save the Children stuff? I was actually telling you about this a little bit ago.
Like the um QAnon stuff.
Yeah, like that QAnon.
Yeah,
So there was that QAnon stuff from years ago, but it was all like in this form of hashtag Save the Children.
Yeah.
So people
That's how
sort
they
of like
roped in all the
reblog it.
housewives.
Right.
Right.
So now I always assumed that QAnon was like co-opting a real and terrifying issue to try to get people on board. Like QAnon is nonsense, of course, but child sex trafficking is real.
Yeah, of course.
But I discovered a few months ago when I looked into it more that kind of it isn't real, despite dozens of advocacy organizations claiming it is, because those organizations, like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, all these different NGOs, they are using bonkers bad statistics that they know are bad to make a satanic panic style thing kind of out of nothing. So let me give you some examples. One of the big statistics you hear, 800,000 kids go missing every year, and they say, and then a claim usually follows that about, half of these or a third of these or whatever are going to be trafficked. The thing is that number comes from a 2002 survey, and crucially, of those 800,000 kids, 99.8% are immediately found. Like they're missing and then they're found like hours or days later. It's just like custody stuff usually. So the children who stay missing, of that, like that 0.02%, well, there's no indication they're being trafficked. From the same report, the number of kids who actually go missing and ended up like kidnapped and sexually taken advantage of is more like 115. So we've gone from 800,000 to 115. And of those cases, I'm actually like, what number of those cases, of those 115 cases, would you guess are associated with cartels or with large criminal organizations like the mafia or something?
That we know of?
Yeah.
10.
The number is 0 ever. So it's not clear that has ever happened at all. Mm-hmm. Another statistic is 1 in 6 children are likely victims of trafficking, but that comes from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's database of cases that are reported to them, which they're an advocacy group for trafficking. So you are only going to report something to them if you think there's trafficking. And also the word likely does a lot of work there because they just mark people as being trafficked if they hear a story and think there's some trafficking. They don't, as an organization, actually do any investigation.
Right. And probably also have a pretty small samples that are coming in and that they're extrapolating massive data from it.
Exactly. Another statistic, 300,000 kids are at risk of being trafficked. This comes from a 2001 survey that's just so chock full of random exaggerations and also really bad use of statistics because it's like the same child will be counted like 4 or 5 times in this survey because they're homeless and they're, in a gang, therefore, so they get counted twice type of thing. To the point where even the author of the survey has said, stop using my survey. It wasn't a good survey. I would do it differently today. And then the last bad statistic I want to talk about is you see all the time on these websites, child sex trafficking is a $32 billion industry. But that number refers to all the estimates of forced work in all industries for children and adults, and also just assumes that every sex worker on the planet is doing it because they're coerced, which is just not the case. So, like, if you've ever made money from OnlyFans, sorry, you're a victim of child sex trafficking now. So all the statistics that these organizations use are like this. They come with these enormous caveats that completely like disqualify any usefulness they might have. Right. And this is all to discount the fact that there simply aren't any child marketplaces. There are no kids chained up in hotels. There's no like global cabals of child sellers. That's just not a thing. When children are abused.
I don't believe that for a second. I just
well, there's no evidence of it.
Well, I think what they're using, undocumented people. I mean, nobody's going to go out there and try to steal a kid that's on the books. I mean, my wife works for social services this entire time. I mean, stealing a kid on the books, not an easy thing to do. If they're not in school, the government knows. They don't go to school, the government knows. Something goes wrong with the kids. I mean, people don't realize how involved the school is with kids. If a kid is registered at that school knows what's up with your family in a way that would probably make you uncomfortable. So
we would still know if it was undocumented, though. Like,
not if we didn't catch them. I'm just saying,
but then there's no reason to think it's happening if there's no evidence.
I guess that. I don't want to get caught in the weeds. When I said, I think it's definitely going on with some undocumented people. I don't mean that like truckloads of kids are going. I just mean it's going on in the world.
Like kids are being abused, but they're not being abused by big organizations, and they're not being like sold and stuff. That's not a thing.
We're talking at like cannibalistic levels, like not many.
Sure. Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's happened like twice. Who cares? Like,
but here's the difficult
part. It's not an epidemic.
Right. Here's the difficult part of this conversation. And that is, how do you take something that elicits such a emotional response that definitely could happen if we weren't actively not making this happen? I think we'd all agree that it would be happening.
Well, I don't know about that. Like, I don't think there's any money in it, because like attraction to prepubescent children is pretty, like, there's no reason for cartels to do stuff like this, even if we were doing it. They make enough money from drugs. This is not a profitable avenue, like selling.
Oh, we're talking cartels specifically. I just meant child trafficking, that people are terrible. Given the opportunity, they would.
The way it happens in real life when children are sexually abused is it's like by their soccer coach, or most likely what it is it's like a queer person runs away from home and they end up,
But their soccer coach, man, ruthless.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's people they trust who are pillars of the community. And like, I feel like this whole thing is a lot of that is people going, we don't know like that. We're going to blame, a global cabal kind of thing. But it's not global. And there's mostly it's like queer teenagers who run away from home and engage in survival sex. Like, those are considered people who are trafficked according to the definition of
that's BS.
Being trafficked. Well, that is 99% of like all trafficking cases is people who are engaging in survival sex, right?
Right.
Like the actual cases of people who are like in chains or whatever.
Totally
that's so rare, and it's almost never kids.
Yeah, I didn't mean to disagree with that. I think I was losing track of what you were trying to say.
No, that's fair. I just threw a ton of stuff at you.
Right, so. Yeah. And I was thinking like, well, is there no child sex trafficking going on at all? And of course there is. Of course there are shady, terrible people out there doing shady, terrible things. Do I think it's going on anywhere near these numbers? Absolutely not. Do I think addressing it in the way that people address it is helpful? I also don't think that's the case at all. What you need to do is find these kids and these kids that in our earlier thing, you didn't want them to be aborted. So now that these kids are on the street trying to survive and stuff, you could like feed them.
Right, exactly. I think stuff like, the Texas law that is going to be like reporting trans kids and stuff to like, non-supportive parents and like taking kids away from their supportive parents. That is going to cause a lot more sex trafficking than anything else, because queer kids are just going to run away from home. And then, what they're going to like end up sleeping with their sketchy boyfriend who's older to have a place to stay. And then, their sketchy boyfriend might be like, hey, why don't you not have sex with me, but have sex with my friend because he'll pay me? And like that is what sex trafficking looks like in real life. You know, it's not a network. It's like 4 people.
Absolutely. And that's what I was saying. I didn't understand that you were just talking about like global cabals only. Do I think that exists? No. And I was saying the same thing like about Madison Cawthorn. Do I think there's a global cabal of orgy sex parties in Washington, D.C.? No, I don't. Do I think that there are orgy sex parties in Washington, D.C.? Yeah, probably. I think there are.
You know, maybe, but like,
do I think he was invited? No, I don't.
Exactly. So, yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like the real way in which all this happens is it's, you know, a 1/1000th of the numbers that people think, and B, it's always way more complicated, and C, there's no like nefarious evil organization behind it.
Right. So you want to put an end to sex trafficking. What you need to do is help families.
Yeah, and just like help runaways, that kind of thing, and
help families not be the messed up families that caused the runaways to begin with, and then of course, if that does happen, help the runaways. You know, I got mad respect for my wife. This is what my wife does. Is basically she helps families try to stay together so that they don't become homeless runaways. And if they do become homeless runaways, she helps them try to establish their lives either separately or together. It's like, that's basically what she does, is she walks around this town and finds people that needs help and helps them. And it's really quite impressive. It makes me realize there is not a lot of nobility to the work I do.
No, that's fair. And like, mad respect to her. But, you know, I think I had this idea in my head before reading all of this, that there probably was like truckloads of children and stuff. You know, I assumed that was a real thing.
I didn't. I
was really surprised to learn that it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, because, well, I mean, I obviously gravitated right to immigrants.
Right. Yeah.
To undocumented people.
Right. And it doesn't seem like that's, you know, really happening.
Yeah. But of course, it is happening on a microcosmic level.
Right. It's happening, you know, in the way we just talked about.
Right. You know, and that's kind of the hard part about this conversation, is what I was saying, is that how do you take a conversation and have a sober, healthy conversation about something that elicits such an emotional response?
Right.
And so here we are with, let's say, a room full of 1,000 people, and my job is to go in there and share these stats with them and try to convince them that while kids are in danger and need our help, they're not in danger from what you think they are, and we need to identify the real bad guy here. And
exactly.
It's obviously it's your soccer coach.
Right. Those freaking soccer coaches.
Unfortunately, you're totally true. Actually, when I think about this over the years, most situations have been a coach or a teacher, which is terrible, because most great situations where kids have learned and changed in positive ways have also come from a coach or a teacher. Yeah.
Well, even when you think about like Jeffrey Epstein, who all these conspiracy theories are floating around, like ultimately he was just a guy who like a bunch of kids and parents trusted. And that's the formula for child abuse.
I do want to know what people were doing on his island.
No, that's fair. But like, I think it's unlikely it went much beyond it. But, you know, who knows? All I can tell you is there's not the evidence. You know, the evidence isn't there like people say it is.
Right. Now,
and if you try and look up this stuff, you don't find an article that is like you have to dig to find articles in mainstream publications, which are there, that say, oh, this is all BS, by the way. But they're buried under pages and pages of, you know, the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or other groups that are like that are all like 70 billion kids are abducted every single year, you know, and they all look like real things. And we're all primed to, because if you look at any other issue, the advocacy groups for that issue are usually like, they know what they're talking about. But on this issue, they're grifters and idiots, and it's weird.
Well, therein lies the problem with, obviously, social media, but with search engines.
Yeah.
And that is, a couple of years ago, all the fringies were going like, well, in order to find the truth, you got to look on the third page of Google. But now you're telling me, in order to find the truth Chance,
is on the
you got to look on
Google.
the third page of Google to get past all the other stuff.
Right.
Isn't that disturbing?
It's insane. It is disturbing. And that is what disturbs me about this issue. Is like, how many other issues do I have an assumption in my head that like I would have to specifically hear, oh, this is bogus, by the way, to even know to look and see if it is or not.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it does. But that's the problem. You have to, we've talked about this a bunch. There's too much knowledge for one person to know. You have to trust someone. Who are we going to trust?
Well, normally I would trust the first result on Google, but I can't even do that.
Maybe we need to start social think tanks.
What do you mean?
Okay, so you, me, and 8 friends, we get together and we say, Kara, women's rights and whatever the hell's going on in North Korea. You over there, you do this thing, and then we commune once a month, and you're my trusted expert, and I trust you to deliver the facts. And for me to make my decision based off of the facts that you have researched and delivered, because we're not capable of doing all these things. So you just got to find people that you trust to deliver the facts. Of course, they're going to have their own opinion, but.
Right. But people who you can trust to, honestly do a little bit of research. Right.
Yeah. And bring you credible information for you.
Honestly, I think that's a really good idea. And I wish that was normalized. Like,
we're going to start social think tanks. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We should. This should be a movement of people just being like, okay, but who's in your social think tank? Well, it's Dave and Marlene and Ted. And every week we get together to figure out what's real.
Yeah, we're affiliated with these think
month,
tanks. Right? That's who we're voting with. We're voting with these other think tanks.
Yeah.
It'll just tribalize like everything else, but it'll take a couple of decades.
Yeah. Community organizing. That's what it's about.
All right.
Well, that's my rant. I hope you enjoyed it.
All right. Is that it for us?
Yeah, that's all I got.
All right. Man, that was a wordy one. Lots of opinions, lots of attitudes, a lot of pissed off listeners, and a lot of come on back next week. You're listening to Radio Wasteland.
Jake Angeli is the QAnon shaman.
At what point in your life did you stop listening to the mainstream narrative?
When I realized that doing my own research brought me more information than listening to the news ever could. Once I stopped allowing the news to make up my mind or my narrative for me, I grew exponentially, not just politically, but spiritually, intellectually, and physically. Because, I was actually able to take the information that I was absorbing and apply it to my activist routine.